One of the great pleasures of being in the antique business is it's often around the people you get to meet. Just because you're in the industry and you have the chance to, on occasion, meet direct descendants of some pretty famous people, people who did amazing things in American history, European history, and other places around the world. And in the 1990s, we got a phone call. We were doing estate auctions, and we got a phone call from a little old lady in Salem, Massachusetts. And she was getting ready to move out of her house in Salem off of Lafayette Street and into assisted living. She was in her mid 80s. She was getting pretty long in the tooth, and she decided she needed a little help getting along with things. And she was going to move, and she owned a number of antiques, she told us, and she'd like us to come down and talk to her about taking some of the things for auction and perhaps helping us move. She's a classic Yankee. So in other words, she wanted us to take some things for auction, and while we were at it, move her things to her new place of her new residence in the town as sort of a service. And after meeting her, we agreed to do that. We said, whatever you need, ma'am, we'll be happy to bring it over for you and so forth. And while we were in the process, the Peabody Essex Museum and the Essex Institute in Salem, which have now merged into the Peabody Essex Museum, were also there gathering things for the museum because of the collection she had. And she had an amazing collection because she referred to herself as the last leaf on the tree. She was the descendant, a direct descendant and keeper, basically, of the property of Nathaniel Bowditch. And if you've ever sailed in your life, you know exactly who Nathaniel Bowditch is. He was born in 1773, and he died in 1838. And he, of course, published the very famous, in 1802, the very famous The American Practical Navigator. And Nathaniel Bowditch was truly an American gem. The Practical Navigator, that book on navigation that he wrote way back then, is still in print today. It is standard issue to this day on U.S. naval ships. It's in its 78th printing. And in 1867, the U.S. government, the Navy, bought the rights to the book because they wanted to maintain it, because it was considered to be such a crucial tool in navigation. And I've sailed all my life, so I learned about Nathaniel Bowditch and the Practical Navigator way back when I don't think I was even 10 years old, and I'd seen copies of it around. And what it was a manual that Nathaniel Bowditch wrote. He had no formal education. He went to work at the age of 12 in a ship's chandlery. He worked for his dad for a couple of years, and then he went to work in a ship's chandlery in Salem, which was a booming business at the time. They would supply equipment, gear, navigational equipment, sextants, and odds and ends that would go on it was basically a ship store. For people that were going to sea, and they would provide goods and maps and whatnot that were needed on these ships, and he worked there. And during this time, he taught himself Latin, Greek, advanced mathematics, and so forth. And eventually, he went to sea. And while he was at sea, he was using a book that was provided by a British chart maker, and that sort of thing, and he found all kinds of errors in it, and he corrected them all, and he ended up writing the book, The Practical Navigator. And what was amazing about this book was it was usable by anybody on a ship, any person with a basic reading and basic math education could use this book to safely navigate a ship. And it revolutionized how ships were navigated their way around the world, in addition to drawing maps and all kinds of things. He was just one of these amazing guys, and he went on to have a fantastic career long after. He worked for the government. He was the head of the Essex Institute. He did actuarial studies in the Maritimes for marine insurance and all kinds of things. But he was a Renaissance guy, a self-taught Renaissance guy. He was one of the few from Salem who was truly brilliant that didn't first go to Harvard before he went on his merry way in life. He had a big family. He owned this beautiful house in Salem, and eventually he moved into Boston toward the end of his life, but he lived in Salem for most of it, and he was raised in Salem. And Miss Broadhead was the lady who called us. Her name was Eleanor Broadhead, and she was this wonderful old lady, and she was so enthusiastic, and she had these absolutely amazing things that had come down through the Bowditch family, all kinds of things. And the Peabody Museum got some of the original papers from Nathaniel Bowditch and letters and that sort of thing. And what was left, she decided she wanted to sell. So we bought the collection from her. And in it, she had some China trade things, and she had a lot of the typical stuff you'd expect to find in a well-to-do federal period home in Salem from the early 18th century, early 1800s rather. All kinds of great things, kitchenwares and whatnot. But one of the things that caught my eye in the lot when I got it was this box. And this box is not a rare type of box. It's a fairly common type of Ditty box or pantry box. And Miss Broadhead was very proud of it. And I said, was this one of Bowditch's? She said it was not only one of Bowditch's. He took it to sea with him, and it was packed in his trunk, in his sailor's chest. And when he went to sea, he took the sailor's chest, which was common, and in the chest they would pack the things they would need, and the chests would be stored in the holds of the ships. And then as they were needed, the sailors would go down and get what they wanted. And in this, he kept some personal items. Apparently, I guess he kept some sort of religious tokens and pencils and odds and ends, things that he might need, small things that he didn't want to lose track of. And he had them in this little green painted box. And this little green painted box went out with him, according to Miss Broadhead, on about 5 different sailing trips. And when he left the sea, he kept this on his nightstand next to his bed as a reminder, always. Now, the box wasn't made as a maritime box. It was made as a fairly standard late 18th, early 19th century box. They made a lot of them here in New England. And without that bit of history, it's not that interesting of a box. It's a perfectly good one. It's got the original green paint on it. It's beautifully made, probably from maple. It's all steam bent and then pinned into place. The Shakers even made boxes like this. But it's not about the box. It's about what the box had seen and who it lived with. And it lived with Nathaniel Bowditch right up to his death at the age of 65 in 1838. And Miss Bowditch inherited it from her family around 1910, 1915 or so. She lived to be very old, and she was a young woman. She never married. And all of these things she kept close, and she hung on to them through her entire life. And the Bowditch family didn't have a lot of descendants, but they had a few. But she was the last one. She was the last direct descendant of Nathaniel Bowditch, and so she called herself the last leaf on the tree. I always thought that was really cute. And she was a nice lady. We got her all settled into her house, into her new place rather, where she was going. It was a beautiful assisted living place. And my guys put the bed together for her and put her bureau back put it where it belonged, and laid out the stuff and got her all situated. And she couldn't have been more gracious about it. She thought it was great. And then we went on and we sold a great many of the things that she had. But one of the things that came out of that collection was this box, which I've kept ever since. And every time I see it, I think of my own childhood sailing and my own interest in the ocean, and then the connection to the navigator himself, Nathaniel Bowditch. And I'm just delighted to have it. And that is the point of all this. That is one of the great joys in collecting today, is owning something that belonged to somebody who did something really interesting that changed the world. And Nathaniel Bowditch's work changed the world of navigation, as well as he also did celestial things to do with celestial navigations, and interpreted a very famous French book on the subject and so forth. But he literally changed the world, and I'm very pleased to own his Ditty box, as they would call it. All right, and that's all I have to say on it. It's just a quick video about it. It's just one of the little fun things about collecting. Have a good week. See you in a few days. Bye-bye.